Chapter 521. Kim got straight to the point. The guy who beat you is Wilbur Penn, the secret boss and owner of Cape International. He was the one who screwed us over when we were competing against Cape for the commercial district project. Dorson Ches even died because of it. He's your brother, isn't he? What are you trying to say? Sabrina stared coldly at Kim. Kim let out a chuckle. I'm saying that if you're going to die either way, you might as well do something useful before your death. Wilbur has a girlfriend, Faye Eve. She's a regular mortal with a job. She goes to work and comes home every day around the same time. I can tell you the route she takes too, if you want it. Sabrina was silent, and Kim smiled as she got to her feet. I've booked flight tickets for tomorrow night. 8 o'clock. I'm going back to report. Kim left after that, and Sabrina stared blankly at a painting on the wall in front of her. It was a painting of a sunset, the red so bright it looked almost like blood. That evening, Faye got off work and entered the car, and Jose drove the both of them to Sea Lake Island. Cape International had been on a pretty good streak lately, and Faye was in a good mood. It was just that Wilbur had promised to take her out for dinner but had not seen it through, and Faye was hellbent on having that happen tonight. The thought made Faye smile, and she giggled to herself. She had pretty much figured out that Wilbur was still a virgin. Men like him were so rare. She had really lucked out here. Yes, she was going to dress up tonight and put herself out there for Wilbur. After all, the guy really was quite dense when it came to this. All of a sudden, a gigantic thump could be heard. Faye then felt the car rise up in the air, flipping over as if it was being tossed around. The impact filled her chest with fear and even a sense of hopelessness. What if she was smashed along with the car when it landed? Just then, the necklace Faye was wearing cracked and let out a blue glow that enveloped her completely. The car finally landed heavily on the ground after flipping in the air several times. Jose had done his best to control the car upon the collision. However, the impact was too powerful, and he could not steer the car at all. Right as it landed, Jose wrenched his safety belt off and dove toward Faye with all his might to wrap himself around her, softening the impact on her. The car made a few more flips after landing on the ground, and both of them were tossed out. The motion made Jose dizzy, and he was also covered in injuries from protecting Faye. There were even some wounds on him that exposed his bones, and he would have died had he not been an aura-level cultivator. Faye, however, was completely unharmed due to the protection of her necklace and Jose's own body. She got up in a daze and tried to shake Jose awake, who was barely conscious. Get out of here. Someone's trying to kill you. Jose gasped before he fell unconscious altogether. Faye was shocked to hear that and turned around to look behind her. A woman drenched in blood crawled out from the overturned car, making her way to Faye. Faye ran for her life, fumbling for her phone and calling Wilbur. Wilbur rushed out of Sea Lake Island in a matter of seconds, driving at full speed to the scene of the accident. Faye wrenched her heels off, not daring to slow down in the slightest. It was fortunate that she was uninjured, and the fact that she was now a cultivator made her a lot stronger than a regular human being, which allowed her to run quite fast. The woman chasing after Faye was clearly injured and moving slowly enough for Faye to put distance between them, making her feel a lot more relieved. A little over 10 minutes later, Wilbur got to the scene. He hopped out of his car as soon as it slowed, scooping Faye into his arms. Are you all right? Wilbur asked worriedly. Chapter 522. Faye shook her head. I'm fine, but Jose's unconscious. That woman's chasing after me. Thank goodness. Let me see who had the nerve to do this. Wilbur made his way over to the accident, still carrying Faye in his arms. Faye tightened her arms around Wilbur's neck, falling silent as she felt a strong sense of security. For a second, she seemed to have forgotten that she had just been in an accident as she leaned into Wilbur's chest blissfully. Not long after, Wilbur saw a woman stumbling over, drenched in blood. Wilbur stopped in his tracks, staring her down coldly. You're fucking dead. The woman said nothing, struggling as she made her way to Wilbur. There was a dagger in her hand, and she swung it at Faye. Wilbur's gaze lit ablaze with fury, and he aimed a fierce kick at her. The woman's body was dismembered into pieces, with blood gushing out in all directions. Wilbur sneered, stepping over the pieces of her corpse to get to Jose. Jose was fully unconscious then. Wilbur put Faye down, channeling spirit energy into Jose's body to temporarily stabilize his injuries. Elsa, Skylar, Eileen, and the rest had also just arrived, and they stared at the wreckage in shock. Wilbur said in a dark voice, "Skylar, send Jose to the hospital. Elsa, take care of the scene. Everyone else can head back." The others nodded, and Wilbur returned to Sea Lake Island with Faye and the others. Everyone sat in Wilbur's room, stealing wary glances at Wilbur's furious expression every now and then. No one had ever seen him quite this angry before. He was silent, but the fury in his eyes was enough to make the air grow thick with tension. Faye was the first to speak. "I think we should just let Elsa do a search on this person. Let's find out why they want to kill me before we do anything about it." "She's from Joy Corp," Farron said with a frown. Faye was stunned for a moment before nodding. Kip had always been competing fiercely against Joy Corp, but it was a bit too much that they were trying to win like this. They were competing businesses. If Faye died, Cape could just send a new chairman over. Doing this would only get Joy Corp into more trouble, and they doubted Kim was dumb enough to do something like this. Wilbur took out his phone and made a call to Beverly. "Find out where Kim Jenkins, CEO of Joy Corp, is right now." "Hello, Deacon Penn. Give me a second. The data's loading. It says here Kim has just onboarded a plane for the capital of Galoria." "Got it. Thank you, Beverly. Goodbye now." "It's a pleasure to serve you, Deacon Penn. Goodbye." Wilbur hung up the call, his tone icy. "Kim Jenkins is on the run. It seems like there's more to this. I don't think she would stoop that low just to compete against me," said Faye. Wilbur said, "It doesn't matter why she did this. I'm not going to get the soonest flight available to the capital of Galoria." "What are you planning to do?" Faye asked, stunned. Wilbur squinted into the distance. "I'm going to see just how powerful Pentagon Corp is." Chapter 523. Farron frowned at once. "Dude, you're going to a foreign country. Pentagon Corp is Galoria's biggest moneymaker. They have enormous funds and an endless amount of power there. It's dangerous if you go on your own." "Exactly," Faye said worriedly. "We can just investigate Joy Corp. If this is about Kim Jenkins, she'll have to pay for what she's done." Wilbur's voice was dark. "No one does this to me and gets away with it. I've made my mind up." Everyone else saw the look on his face and did not say anything else. "Could you help me with something, Eileen?" Wilbur said suddenly. Eileen smiled. "Sure. What is it?" "Could you please step in as Faye's bodyguard while I'm away and ensure her safety?" Jose was in the hospital, and Wilbur did not trust anyone else on Sea Lake to be capable enough for the job. Eileen lit up at once. "Sure, but you'll owe me a favor." "Of course," Wilbur said. Eileen broke out into a wide grin. "Don't you worry. I'll be by Miss Eve's side every second of the day until you come back." Wilbur nodded silently. Over on an international flight to the capital of Galoria, Kim looked out of the window silently. She knew what was coming for her. Joy Corp had been Pentagon Corp's way of breaking into the Dasha enormous market and profiting off their population of almost 1.5 billion people. But Kim had failed, and Joy Corp was still far from the goals it had set out to achieve. She had even lost the Ches siblings, Dorson and Sabrina, while she was at it. The best thing that could come out of this was just her resigning and losing everything. The worst thing that could come out of this was not something she even dared to imagine. Everyone in Pentagon Corp was no stranger to the High Lady's ruthless ways. Behind that breathtaking face was cold, cruel monster whose power is limitless. It was all Wilbur's fault that Kim ended up here. She admitted that Wilbur was powerful, but she could not accept defeat just like that. That was why she had provoked Sabrina into killing Faye at the last minute. There was no returning to Seachertown for Kim anyway. Faye's death would at least bring Kim a little comfort. The plane landed slowly. Kim walked out of the airport with her bags and was escorted into a car by 2 men in suits. A little over half an hour later, the car drove into a luxury residential area in Hener City. The area was rather hilly and not very vast, but Pentagon Corp had turned it into a luxurious stretch of mansions. Michelle, the current CEO of Pentagon Corp, lived there. The car was thoroughly inspected at the foot of the mountain before it was allowed passage. There were security guards everywhere, and all of them were armed. There were 3 security checkpoints to pass through. At last, The car stopped at the top of the hill in front of the biggest mansion in the area. The two men in suits got out of the car and walked Kim to the entrance of the house. The camera above the gate swiveled over, and the gate swung open slowly. Kim walked into a massive main hall that was around 400 to 500 square meters wide. A decadent chandelier hung from the ceiling, lighting the space up in a dreamy glow. 8 pillars stood in the middle of the hall, all of them carved with the world's finest sculptures. The paintings on the walls were jaw-dropping, even rarer than those in the Louvre. Chapter 524. At the furthest end of the hall was a meeting table. It was oval-shaped, made entirely of white jade, and gilded with gold. The red plush chairs surrounding the table looked comfortable and elegant. Everything in there radiated an air of wealth and artistry. There was a figure sitting at the meeting table, hunched over a Bloody Mary in a tall glass. Kim was escorted all the way to the meeting table, where she sank into a deep bow. "I'm sorry, High Lady. I have let you down." The figure raised her head at once. Her long black hair was pinned into a bun. She had pearl earrings that framed her breathtaking features. Big black eyes on an exquisite face that radiated an air of luxury and power. That was Michelle Jenkins, the second most powerful person in all of Pentagon Corp. Aside from her father, the chairman of Pentagon Corp, Michelle was the most powerful person in all of the company whom everyone feared. Michelle looked up at Kim, taking a small sip of her Bloody Mary before saying, "Yes, you did disappoint me. I'm sorry." Kim remained in a bow, never straightening back up. Michelle said, "But what disappointed me was not your failure to expand into the Dasha market. You disappointed me by provoking Sabrina Ches to kill Faive." Kim's chest lurched, and she collapsed to the ground in fear. "It's my fault. I shouldn't have done that. Please punish me, High Lady." The High Lady knew about what Sabrina had done, which meant that she had eyes everywhere and there was nothing Kim could hide. "Your apology seems sincere. Throw her into the water dungeon then. I'll think about what to do with you." The two men in suits walked up to Kim, carrying her away. Kim's expression dimmed in hopelessness, but she did not even dare to beg for forgiveness. Very soon, she was taken into an underground cell. The two men stripped her completely, tossing her into a filthy pool of water with her hands cuffed. The cuffs were fastened to the walls on both sides of the pool, and Kim was strung up by her wrists. Her ankles barely grazed the ground, and her mouth was still above the water. The two men closed the door to the cell, turning to leave. Just then, water rodents swam. They seemed to have been starved for ages and biting some flesh before them. Kim's cries of agony echoed in the dungeon. However, no one heard her. The next night, Wilbur's plane landed in Hener City. It was already past 10 o'clock when he got out of the airport. Faye had booked him a deluxe suite in Sky Garden Hotel, one of the best hotels in Hener City. Wilbur was escorted to his room upon checking in and entered after waving the bellboy off. He put down his bags and lit up a cigarette. He would head to the Pentagon Corp headquarters the next day, seeing as it was almost impossible to miss. At a little past 11, Wilbur left the hotel to get some food in the stalls alley next to the hotel for supper. He walked up to the first food truck, asking for a plate of pasta, a chicken chop, and a beer. To Wilbur, this kind of food was much better than those in hotels and fancy restaurants. The man in the middle of the food truck who greeted Wilbur warmly, whipping up his order and sending it up to him. Wilbur picked up the bottle of beer and took a long swig. As he tilted his head backward, a black dot came into sight. The black dot seemed to get bigger and bigger. "What the fuck?" Wilbur swore loudly as he flew to his feet and leaped high into the air. Chapter 525. As he rose upwards, Wilbur caught the black dot, or more precisely, the person. "A lady!" Right before Wilbur landed on the ground, he stuck out a leg and pushed himself sideways from a balcony to land on an empty alley behind the hotel. In Wilbur's arms then was a dazed-looking woman who reeked of alcohol. Actually, she even looked a little familiar. Wilbur took a closer look at the lady. She looked a bit like one of Galoria's biggest celebrities, Sylvia Ronan. Despite not paying much attention to the media, Sylvia was a big enough star who had appeared in the biggest headlines enough times for Wilbur to remember her. Was it suicide? Wilbur was a little confused. A while later, he carried Sylvia back to his hotel room. It was late at night, and Wilbur took the long way back so that they would not be seen. He put Sylvia down on the couch, shaking his head. He had just gotten here, and something like this happened. What could have troubled a celebrity this big to jump off a building? The clothes she was wearing did little to hide her perfect curves. Wilbur could not help but marvel to himself, taking in the sight of the beauty before him. Yet he saw Faye all the time and was so used to beauty like hers that Sylvia did not stir anything in him. What Wilbur was confused about was why Sylvia had fallen from a building. Could she have just slipped and fallen because she was drunk? Or was she actually trying to take her own life? Either way, he was just going to wait for Sylvia to wake up and have her leave. After all, there were bigger fish that Wilbur had to fry. Time passed by slowly, and Sylvia began to puke violently all of a sudden. Wilbur huffed exasperatedly. He got up to clean her vomit up, helping Sylvia onto a chair and feeding her a large glass of water. At last, Sylvia returned to her senses. She looked around her in a daze. Am I in hell? Wilbur used his spiritual sense to cast the infinite linguist spell, staring at her quietly. Who are you? Sylvia finally spotted Wilbur, jumping in shock. Wilbur said, "You fell off a building, and I saved your life in time." Sylvia was silent as she recollected what happened. A long pause later, she burst into tears. Wilbur was stunned. What was going on here? Sylvia sobbed as she said, "Why did you have to save me? Why?" "Well, you're an innocent life. I can't just let you plummet to your death. Can I?" Wilbur asked. Sylvia stumbled over to the nearest window, shoving it open to jump again. Yet the window was far too narrow for her to fit through it at all. Sylvia flew into a fit of rage, pummeling at the windowsill and wailing at the top of her lungs. Wilbur had no choice but to drag her back with a frown. "If you really want to die, you're going to have to find a different spot." Sylvia was tossed onto the couch as she stared blankly at Wilbur. A while later, she said, "I fell from the 90th floor. How the hell did you manage to save me? I was in the middle of having a drink when I saw someone falling, so I leaped up to save you. I brought you back to my room since you were unconscious." Wilbur had no choice but to tell the truth. He could not find another explanation. Sylvia was silent for a long time. "You're a cultivator?" Wilbur raised his eyebrows in surprise but quickly calmed down after realizing that it was no surprise someone like Sylvia knew about cultivators. He nodded slowly. Sylvia smiled. "You're in trouble. Big trouble." "What do you mean by that?" Wilbur asked. Chapter 526. Sylvia said nothing more, grabbing Wilbur's pack of cigarettes on the table and smoking one. "Are you from Dasha?" Sylvia asked, glancing at the cigarette brand. Wilbur nodded. Sylvia took a long drag off her cigarette. "You should leave. If you can do so, that is." "I haven't got any plans of leaving for now," said Wilbur. Just then, there was a knock on the door. Sylvia panicked at once. Wilbur got up to answer the door. All he could see were a few men who tried to barge in at once. Wilbur flared up in anger at the sight, grabbing them by the neck and throwing them out harshly. The men cried out in agony as they landed in a heap, all of them injured and 7 breaking a few bones. They glowered at Wilbur but could only grit their teeth through the pain and stumble away in a hurry. Wilbur sneered, closing the door and turning back to see Sylvia staring at him, shell-shocked. "That was amazing," said Sylvia. Wilbur smiled. It was okay. He sat down on the couch after that. Sylvia walked up to sit next to him, peering at him up and down curiously. "Enjoying the view?" Sylvia laughed, leaning back against the couch and taking another drag of her cigarette. "I'm sorry, but you can't leave anymore." "Why are you sorry?" asked Wilbur. Sylvia smiled bitterly, her expression creasing into one of pain and distress. "They'll kill you, then drag me into the abyss to suffer endlessly." "Seriously? You're one of the most famous celebrities in the world. Everyone in Dasha knows who you are." "A celebrity, huh?" Sylvia smirked. She figured that Wilbur was not local and got straight to the point. "We're no more than pawns in a game, only to be used as playthings or venting their frustrations." Wilbur did not know what to say. He had, after all, heard a thing or two about the situation in Gloria before. Yet he had not expected for someone like Sylvia to still be victim to a fate like this. These plutocrats were really something, weren't they? "Were those men just now from your company then?" asked Wilbur. Sylvia smiled. "Yes, They've been assigned to watch over me. I was serving this government official one night, and he got a little drunk, so I managed to escape to the rooftop in my life. It's just my luck that I had to run into you, Uro. Kind of rude to say that to someone who just saved your life, no? Said Wilbur. Sylvia glanced at him. You'll be dead yourself in no time. They're going to do whatever it takes to drag me back into the abyss, and they're not going to let you go either. Not much of a point in being nice to someone who's about to die. She got up and walked over to the liquor cabinet, picking up a bottle and chugging it straight. Wilbur shook his head. I don't have any plans to die just yet. It'd be nice if you didn't drink yourself to death in my room too. He left to go to bed, and Sylvia continued to chug from the bottle with a numb expression. The next morning, Wilbur was still in the middle of meditating when a loud banging sound came from the door. He huffed impatiently, getting up to see who it was. Sylvia was in the living room, her clothes askew as she opened her eyes blearily. Wilbur shook his head and went to open the door. A couple looking to be in their 50s or 60s came into sight with a few other middle-aged people behind them calling out loudly when they came in. Where's Sylvia? Who the hell are you? And who are you? Wilbur asked coldly. I'm Sylvia's father. Get out of the way. The old man shoved Wilbur aside, barging in with the others behind him. Wilbur let out a sigh, closing the door. What's happened to you, Sylvia? Did he take advantage of you? Is he making you do something you don't want to? Why did you try to end your life, Sylvia? Did he push you to do it? Chapter 527. Sylvia rolled her eyes impatiently at the rapid-fire questions, saying nothing. You've got some nerve, taking advantage of our Sylvia. Do you know who she is? Sylvia's mother was the first to lash out, her hand flying out to slap Wilbur across the face. Wilbur sneered, grabbing the woman's hand and throwing her against the sofa. Sylvia's mother stared at Wilbur in disbelief for a second before cursing at him as the other relatives yelled at Wilbur as well. Their accusations were completely ridiculous, alleging that Wilbur had seduced Sylvia because he was after her looks and riches. Wilbur was annoyed at the accusations but could only hold back on Sylvia's account. Sylvia got to her feet and yelled, "Shut the fuck up!" Her family members were thrown off guard, staring at her in shock. Sylvia barked out a laugh. Why the sudden care for me, huh? What were you doing when I was getting taken advantage of by those plutocrats and officials? What were you doing when I came to you begging for your help? What's that supposed to mean? Sylvia's mother protested at once. Sylvia, it's your honor to get the chance to serve these powerful men. Do you know how many women in the world would kill to have a chance like that? Exactly. You weren't blessed with a face and body like that for nothing, especially not to be wasted on someone like this bastard. Sylvia's father chimed in as well, glaring at Wilbur. Wilbur was completely shocked by their words. It seemed like Sylvia's parents had known about what was happening to their daughter for a while now, but from the sound of it, they seemed to support her living this way, and were even proud of it. Had they never even considered how Sylvia had felt about all of this before, it was no wonder she wanted to end her life. To be put through so much suffering and have parents this shameless. Wilbur did not know how Sylvia had been able to hold on for so long. The other people in the room were clearly Sylvia's other relatives as well, and they began lecturing Sylvia for how ungrateful she was. They were saying that if it had not been for Joy Corp, she would not have acquired this much wealth and fame. Her suicide attempt was a gesture of great disrespect to the rest of her family, as well as to Joy Corp. Sylvia covered up her ears, her expression creasing with distress. Wilbur shouted at once, "Get out of my room, or I'll have to make you. Who the hell are you to talk to us like that?" Sylvia's mother glowered at Wilbur viciously. "I'm going to report you for assaulting my daughter. You're going to end up in jail real soon. You piece of shit." Wilbur's expression darkened, and he reached out to slap her square in the face. The crisp sound rang through the air, displacing all the other noise in the room. Sylvia's mother was dizzy from the slap, and the rest of the relatives stared at Wilbur in shock as if they could not believe what he had done. Wilbur flung the door of his room open, shouting, "Get out!" The words brought about a wave of pressure. Sylvia's parents and the rest of the relatives turned pale and actually ended up doing as they were told obediently. Wilbur slammed the door shut after they were gone, walking back up to Sylvia. She had sat back down on the couch, picking up the box of cigarettes and lighting one numbly. Wilbur sighed. Have your parents and family always been like this? Sylvia laughed bitterly. I'm their cash cow. Of course, I have to keep the act up and sleep with whoever I'm told to. That's the only way these people will keep getting money. They'd hate to let me die. Chapter 528. I'm really sorry that this is happening to you, said Wilbur. Sylvia blew out a ring of smoke, shrugging her shoulders. Doesn't mean much for a dead man to feel sorry for me. How are you so sure that I'm going to die? Wilbur asked. Sylvia said, well, I guess you don't know just how powerful Joy Corp is in Galoria yet. You won't be nearly as confident when you do. In fact, you'll even wish you were dead. They sound pretty badass, huh? Wilbur chuckled. Sylvia glanced at him coldly. This is them being nice, trying to guilt me into submission using my family. If I don't give in, they're going to start threatening me and even use violence. You were dead from the moment you decided to save me. Well, it's good that I just happened to be here because I have some business to settle with Joy Corp myself, said Wilbur. Sylvia was taken aback and looked at Wilbur with a frown. Are you sure you haven't lost your mind? Nope, I haven't. I'm going to make them pay, replied Wilbur in a deep voice. Sylvia was stunned, her gaze towards Wilbur turning solemn. A long while later, she asked, why? They tried to kill my friend Indasha but failed. Kim Jenkins, the CEO of Joy Corp, fled back here after and I followed her, said Wilbur. Sylvia frowned at Wilbur. Are you some big shot, Indasha? What's your name? Yeah, I'm brilliant. My name's Trevor Penn. Sylvia was silent for a while before chuckling and saying, but you're in Galoria, not Dasha. It doesn't matter where I am. If they don't hand Kim Jenkins over, I'm going to kill every last person in Joy Corp until they do, said Wilbur calmly. Sylvia was clearly shocked by Wilbur's words. Killing every single person in Joy Corp would take someone extremely powerful. Wilbur chuckled. Don't underestimate my power. Sylvia was silent for a long time before eventually saying, well, can you help me? I could, yes. You want to be free from Joy Corp's control, and you have all the dirt on them. That's enough to make us allies, Wilbur replied with a chuckle. Sylvia frowned, taking a long drag of her cigarette before saying, but I don't have any tangible proof. All my devices are confiscated from me right before an assignment. That's fine. Galoria is a country of free speech, isn't it? I'm sure you'd find journalists who'd want to listen to your story as long as you're willing to put it out there. Wilbur wanted to find Kim and kill her for her attempt at Faye's life. Sabrina could not have attempted to kill Faye of her own accord as both women did not know each other. Kim had to be behind all of this, and she was going to die for that. Joy Corp was going to pay too. If Pentagon Corp, the real mastermind behind all of this, had the nerve to even intervene, they were going to suffer Wilbur's wrath as well. Anyone who touched one of Wilbur's friends was going to get it. Staring at a relentlessly confident Wilbur, Sylvia made up her mind at last. She put out her cigarette and stared right at him. I can expose them, but you need to think this through. These people are a lot more powerful than you think. Just then, the door of Wilbur's room was opened without a sound. A short, muscular man in a suit walked in slowly. Sylvia's expression shifted at once. Damian, your actions have greatly disappointed our High Lady, Miss Ronan. The man, Damian Anders, closed the door as he made his way towards Sylvia. Chapter 529. Sylvia's expression was one of utter terror. Wilbur got to his feet, standing in front of Sylvia. Don't come any closer. Damian's expression darkened as he eyed Wilbur. I'm just here to take Miss Ronan back. Someone else will handle you. You're not taking anyone away, Wilbur said calmly. Damian glanced at Wilbur. He raised his palms, which glowed with aura light as a wave of pressure spread out. Sylvia could not help but back up from the force, shouting, he's a cultivator, one of Joy Corp's fighters. No worries. I'll take care of it. Wilbur smiled. Damian flared up in fury, slashing his hands through the air like two razor-sharp knives in the direction of Wilbur's chest. Wilbur merely chuckled, throwing out an attack of his own. With a loud collision, Damian flew backward and slammed against a pillar, sliding down slowly as blood trickled from his mouth. His chest was caved in. Sylvia cried out in shock, staring at Wilbur in disbelief. What's the matter? Wilbur asked with a smile. Sylvia was silent for a long time before finally managing to say, "He was a cultivator." "Yeah. He's trash when facing up against someone like me." Wilbur grabbed Damian by the ankle, dragging him up to the door and flinging him out of the room before closing the door and returning to the couch. Sylvia was still in shock for a long time. "You're really good." "Of course," Wilbur gloated. Yet Sylvia still seemed worried. "He's only one fighter. I know Casper has specially trained experts under him who are much more powerful than Damian." "They're all the same to me," Wilbur said. Sylvia let out a long sigh. She sat back down on the couch, giving it some thought before eventually saying, "I'll call the reporters. At the very least, I'll be dying with you. Don't be so negative about things. Besides, you were already prepared to die. There's nothing to be scared of." Wilbur was more than interested in screwing Joy Corp over. The downfall of his enemies brought him great satisfaction, and it would be even better if Sylvia could get out of the suffering she was in too. Had it not been for Sylvia, Wilbur would have just shown up at Joy Corp already. Upon making up her mind, Sylvia picked up the phone and dialed a number. At the same time, Casper P. was furious in his chairman's office over at the Joy Corp headquarters. Sylvia had slipped away the night before while one of the officials she had been serving got too drunk and was now with same stranger. Casper made Sylvia's parents and relatives try and guilt Sylvia into coming back, but that failed, so he sent Damian, who was beaten to a pulp as well. Things were getting quite dangerous now. Sylvia knew too much. It was also unclear where the stranger Sylvia was with came from, and it was all the more suspicious that he was a cultivator. If any bad press about the company came out, Casper was going to be in hot water. He knew he could not let this go on. It had to be taken care of as soon as possible. Casper called out to his secretary, "Have Jamal kill the guy and bring Sylvia back. Clean up the scene after. Don't leave a trace." "On it," replied the secretary, getting to work at once. Casper lit a cigar and burrowed his brows. Sylvia was an A-list celebrity, the company's biggest moneymaker. She must remain unharmed for now. As for that stranger she was with, he was going to die whether or not he knew anything. The fact that he had been alone with Sylvia would be big enough news to land the company in huge trouble. Chapter 530. Over in the hotel, Sylvia hung up on the call, tossing the phone to the side with a bitter smile. "There aren't any media outlets who want to interview me." "Don't they love celebrity gossip?" Wilbur was a little surprised himself. Sylvia shook her head. "These media giants are pretty much completely under Pentagon Corp's control, including Joy Corp. They'd be more than happy to cover anything else but would never say a word about anything involving the plutocrats." Wilbur nodded. "That's fine. Joy Corp isn't going to back down anytime soon, and this is going to blow up in everyone's faces. The truth won't remain hidden for very long." Just then, Sylvia's phone rang. She glanced at it and picked it up. "Hello, is this Miss Sylvia Ronan?" "Yes. Who is this?" "Hello, I'm the head of Lancet News. We'd like to interview you if you have the time." "Lancet News? I've never heard of you before." "I'm sorry for that. We're a pretty newly formed news outlet, so we don't have much of a name." Sylvia looked at Wilbur, who said, "Your choice doesn't make much of a difference, if you ask me." Sylvia nodded, giving the caller her address and hanging up the call. She was going to expose Joy Corp no matter what news outlet she did it through. She was far from the only victim of the entertainment industry here. Besides, she had been ready to die anyway. Yes, she was going to do whatever it took. Not long after, 2 men and a woman showed up in the room with a case of equipment. Wilbur let them in right away. These people made up all of Lancet News. They were not kidding when they said they were a small news outlet. The head of Lancet News, Tyson Hans, seemed especially nervous in front of Sylvia and could not stop bowing to her. Just then, Wilbur said, "The interview can wait a little. Set up your equipment to film in secret. I'm pretty sure some other people are going to show up soon." Sylvia had been thinking the same thing. She knew that Joy Corp wouldn't hardly back down just like that. Wilbur's plan might just get them more information. Tyson did as he was told, hiding both video cameras he brought along and turning them to face the living room. Just as he was done, Wilbur glanced at the door. "Get inside the bedroom. Someone's here." Tyson knew how dangerous the situation was and entered the bedroom with the two staff members in tow. They pulled up the live footage from the cameras on the screen, watching intently. They were a small news outlet with hardly any name at all, but if they could come out with big news this time, they would be famous. Despite the stakes being high, Tyson was willing to take the risk for his dreams and future. He was going to go bankrupt if he kept on like this. That was also part of the reason he had decided to interview Sylvia. Just then, the door of the room was pushed open again to reveal a muscular man in a suit. Wilbur chuckled. "You really think I'm a joke, huh?" The man glanced at Wilbur. The next second, a long sword appeared in his grasp as a wave of spiritual pressure rippled out of him. Sylvia felt like she was about to suffocate, stumbling backward. Tyson and the rest were shell-shocked by the sight, clamping a hand over their mouths as their hearts raced. Wilbur chuckled at the man. "Ambience level. That's more like it." The man pointed his sword at Wilbur, reaching him with just one step and swinging the sword down. A howling wind whipped around the living room at once, making the air rumble with explosive sounds. Sylvia cried out in terror, falling to the floor. Wilbur sneered coldly. He clenched his right fist, and it began to glow with a spiritual flame.